A long wooden table sat in the yard of a church in Galveston, Texas, on the morning of June 19th, 1882. The women had been cooking since Wednesday. Brisket in the pit, tea cakes cooling on flour sack towels, a wash tub of red drink on ice. These were the dishes that built Juneteenth before America had a name for it. Number 23 on this list took 14 hours over hickory coals, and almost no black family under 50 has ever tasted it. Number 18 was so cheap it fed a whole reunion for $1. Number 7 on this list got dropped from cookbooks before the Civil Rights Act was signed. These foods of freedom were made by people told for 2 centuries they could not celebrate anything. Urban migration and frozen food convenience erased most of them. Let's count down from 30. Number 30, pearl tea cakes. In Galveston in 1866, the first Juneteenth tea cakes came out of a wood burning stove that still smelled like the slavery the women had walked out of the year before. Pearl tea cakes were not fancy. Flour, lard, sugar, a little nutmeg, sometimes a splash of buttermilk if the cow had given that morning. The dough was rolled out on a clean piece of muslin and cut with the rim of a tin cup. They baked in 12 minutes. The cookies came out the color of old ivory, soft in the middle, crisp at the edges, and the women would stack them in a tin to keep them from drying. Children carried them in their pockets to the celebration. By 1975, they were gone from most black households, replaced by Nabisco, freedom used to taste like nutmeg and warm lard. Number 29, smothered yard bird with rice gravy. The cooks pulled the chicken from the yard that morning, plucked it on the back porch, and had it on the stove by 10. A yard bird was not a fryer. It was a working hen, tough, lean, with dark meat that needed 2 hours of low heat to surrender. The cook dredged the pieces in seasoned flour, browned them in lard, then poured a quart of chicken broth over the top and let it whisper on the back burner. The gravy thickened from the flour clinging to the skin. She served it over white rice that had cooked in the same pot the chicken had simmered in. A whole hen fed 9 people on a holiday afternoon. After 1972, grocery store fryers and packaged gravy mix replaced this dish in most kitchens. Nobody pulled a hen from the yard anymore. Number 28, hot water cornbread. The smell of cornmeal hitting hot pork fat used to drift out of every Juneteenth kitchen in East Texas. Hot water cornbread was not the cornbread of a casserole dish. It was the cornbread of a hot iron skillet and 10 fingers. The cook stirred boiling water into yellow cornmeal, added salt and a spoon of bacon grease, then patted the dough into flat cakes the size of a saucer. She fried them in shallow grease until the outside cracked golden and the inside steamed white. By the late 70s, the cornmeal mix bought in a box pushed this off the table. Number 27, red drink with sassafras and hibiscus. The drink was older than the country that had enslaved the people who made it. The recipe came across the ocean from Senegal in the heads of women who could not bring their pots. Dried hibiscus flowers, called bissap in the Wolof tongue, were simmered with sassafras, root, sugar, and a knot of ginger. The picture came out the color of garnet. On Juneteenth tables in Houston, Marshall, and Beaumont, it sat between the brisket and the cake as a memory of West Africa. After the FDA banned saffron, the active oil in sassafras root, in 1960, the drink limped on with red food dye, and by 1978, it had been replaced almost entirely by store-bought strawberry soda. Number 26, salt-cured ham hocks with butter beans. Setting a smoked ham hock in a pot of butter beans was an act of patience and inheritance. The hock had been cured for 8 weeks in a smokehouse out back, hung from a hook above a slow fire of green hickory. When Freedom Day came around in late June, the cook pulled one down, washed off the rind, and dropped it whole into a Dutch oven with a pound of dried butter beans, an onion, and 4 quarts of water. It cooked from sunrise to 2 in the afternoon. The beans turned creamy. The hock fell off the bone. The potlikker was so salty and rich that older folks drank it from a coffee cup. After 1976, when packaged smoked hocks from the grocery store replaced the home smokehouse, the dish lost the smoke it had been born in. Number 25, crackling bread. The women cook crackling bread once a year, the day after hog killing in November, and again on Juneteenth, when the brining barrel still held enough pork skin to render. Cracklings were the crispy bits left over after lard was rendered out of pork fat back. The cook crumbled them into a cornbread batter heavy with buttermilk and a beaten egg, poured the whole thing into a screaming hot skillet of bacon grease, and set it in a wood oven for 35 minutes. The bread came out the color of a chestnut with little salty meat shards hidden in every bite. By the late 70s, hog killing had moved out of the backyard and into commercial plants, and cracklings disappeared from home kitchens. Number 24, pickled pigs, feet in red brine. The pickled pigs, feet sat in a glass jar on the back of the icebox for 2 weeks before the celebration. The cook boiled the feet for 3 hours with bay leaf and black peppercorn until the gelatin loosened, then packed them into a quart jar with white onion, garlic, and a brine of cider vinegar, tinted with the same red dye she used in the punch. The lid sealed. 2 weeks on the shelf, the feet absorbed the sour and the red. On the holiday, a man could pull one out with his fingers and eat it cold off a paper plate. After 1979, the dish had become a punchline on television, and proud cooks stopped putting it on the buffet. Number 23, pit smoked brisket with vinegar mop. The men dug the pit on Thursday evening. By Friday morning, a deacon and his 2 grown sons had a fire of post oak and hickory burning down to coals. They laid a whole packer brisket, 10 pounds untrimmed, on a green oak grate 4 feet above the fire. The mop was simple: cider vinegar, lard melted into water, black pepper, 2 crushed cloves of garlic, a splash of strong coffee. Every 40 minutes, the deacon basted the meat with a rag tied to a stick. The brisket cooked for 14 hours. By the time the congregation arrived on Saturday, the bark was black, the inside was the color of mahogany, and the fat ran clear when you cut it. A single brisket fed 30 people with bread and rice on the side. After 1977, when home smokers and commercial barbecue chains spread across Texas, almost nobody dug a Juneteenth pit anymore. The hands that knew how to mop a brisket for 14 hours retired one by one. Number 22, Burgoo-style emancipation stew. The big iron pot lived in a shed behind the AME church in Marshall, Texas, year-round, and it came out for 2 things only: a wake and Juneteenth. It held 12 gallons. On the morning of June 19th, a grandmother in Marshall would walk it out into the yard with 3 other women and start the fire underneath at 5 in the morning. Into the pot went whatever the community had brought: a beef shank from one family, 2 chickens from another, a possum or a rabbit if a hunter had had a good week, tomatoes, corn cut off the cob, lima beans, okra, 4 pounds of potatoes, 2 whole onions, a handful of cayenne, and a quart of strong coffee for color. The women stirred the pot with a wooden paddle for 9 hours. The meat shredded into the broth, the corn thickened it, the potatoes broke down and held everything together. What most people forget about this stew is that it was never the same twice, and that was the point. It carried whatever the year had given. A good year tasted like beef and pepper. A hard year tasted like rabbit and okra. The pot fed the entire congregation off paper plates with hot water cornbread and red drink. A child got a small ladle. A working man got 2 ladles and a bone to chew. The grandmother who tended the pot never sat down until the last person had been served. After integration brought commercial catering to black church events in the late 70s, the big iron pot stayed in the shed. The last grandmother in Marshall to make the stew died in 1981, and the recipe died with her because nobody had ever written down 12 gallons of memory. I have been looking for that recipe for years, and the closest I have found is a burgoo from Kentucky that lost its black history somewhere between 1920 and the cookbook industry. Number 21, buttermilk biscuits with sorghum. In 1948, every Juneteenth breakfast in a black East Texas household started with a sheet pan of biscuits and a brown glass jar of sorghum syrup. The biscuit dough was made with self-rising flour, cold lard cut in with a fork, and buttermilk that had soured on the counter overnight. The cook patted the dough out by hand, never with a pen, and cut the rounds with the same tin can she used for tea cakes. The biscuits baked 12 minutes in a wood oven until the tops cracked open and the bottoms turned brown. The sorghum, dark as molasses, but with a brighter tang, came from a Tennessee mill and got poured over the split biscuits. The whole house smelled like burned sugar and buttermilk. By the late 70s, refrigerator dough in a paper tube had taken over Sunday breakfast. Number 20, hog maw stuffed with rice and sage. Stuffing a hog maw was a job for a steady-handed woman and a sharp paring knife. The maw was the stomach of a hog, scrubbed clean and turned inside out, then rubbed with salt and lemon for an hour. The cook filled the cavity with white rice, ground sausage, finely chopped onion, a fistful of fresh sage from the kitchen garden, and a beaten egg to bind. She sewed the opening shut with kitchen twine. The whole thing went into a roasting pan with a cup of water and baked for 3 hours in a slow oven. Sliced like a sausage, the maw fed 12 people. After 1977, when most American grocers stopped stocking hog stomachs over the counter, the dish slipped out of black Texas cooking and stayed only in the Pennsylvania Dutch country, where it had always lived a parallel life. Number 19, smothered oxtails over white rice. The oxtails came from the meat market on Saturday morning, 10 pounds for a couple of dollars in 1963. The butcher cut them at the joints. The cook seasoned the pieces with salt, black pepper, garlic powder, and paprika, dredged them in flour, and browned them in bacon grease until the outsides went mahogany. Into the Dutch oven, they went with 3 quartered onions, 2 stalks of celery, a green bell pepper, a bay leaf, and enough water to cover. The pot sat on the lowest burner for 4 hours. The gravy thickened on its own. The meat slid off the bone in long brown ribbons. Served over rice that had cooked plain in chicken broth, a single pot of oxtails fed 8 people with seconds for the children. After 1979, when oxtails became expensive cult cuisine in city restaurants, working black families could no longer afford to put them on a Juneteenth table. Number 18, sweet potato pone. In 1947, a sweet potato pone sat on the dessert table next to the pie and got eaten first. Pone was not pie. The cook grated raw sweet potatoes on a hand box grater into a wooden bowl, added a cup of cane syrup, 2 beaten eggs, a stick of melted butter, a heavy spoon of cinnamon, and half a cup of flour. The whole batter went into a buttered baking dish and into a slow oven for an hour and a quarter. The top set into a thin caramel crust. The middle stayed soft and dense, the color of a copper penny. A square fed one hungry uncle. The dish was simple, sweet, and almost free. And after frozen pie crusts hit the grocery aisle in the early 80s, nobody made it from scratch anymore. Number 17, collard greens cooked with smoked turkey wing. The cooks tied the collard leaves in bundles on Friday and washed them 3 times in cold water to get the grit out. A pot of greens for Juneteenth needed 4 bunches, a whole smoked turkey wing, 2 cloves of crushed garlic, a yellow onion, a tablespoon of red pepper flakes, and 4 hours on the back burner. The smoked wing did the work of ham hock without the heaviness. The greens collapsed and turned army green. The potlikker came out smoky and dark, and folks ladled it over cornbread in a separate bowl. A working man drank the potlikker straight from a coffee mug at the end of the meal. By 1980, packaged greens in cellophane bags and dried ham seasoning had replaced this slow Sunday pot in most kitchens, and most younger cooks had never tasted real potlikker. Number 16, Hoppin' John with red field peas. The red field pea was older than the black-eyed pea in the South, and on a true Juneteenth table in 1955, it was the only pea that belonged in the Hoppin' John. The cook simmered a cup of dried red peas with a chunk of salt pork for 2 hours, then added a cup of long-grain rice and just enough potlikker to cook it through. The rice came out tinted pink from the pea broth. After 1968, when grocery chains stocked only black-eyed peas, the red pea Hoppin' John quietly disappeared. By the way, if you are enjoying these dishes, I put together a recipe guide with the original Juneteenth versions. Link is in the description if you want to keep cooking after this list. Number 15, buttermilk fried catfish. Soaking the catfish in buttermilk overnight was the trick that separated a Juneteenth fish fry from a weekday supper. The fillets sat in a glass bowl of buttermilk and hot sauce in the icebox for 12 hours. In the morning, the cook drained them, dredged them in yellow cornmeal, seasoned with salt, pepper, paprika, and a spoon of garlic powder, then dropped them piece by piece into a cast iron Dutch oven of hot lard. 3 minutes aside, the crust came out the color of straw. The fish inside was white as paper and flaked at the touch of a fork. Folks ate it standing up with a slice of white bread folded around it. Subscribe if these old kitchens speak to you. After 1978, when frozen breaded fillets hit grocery freezers, the buttermilk overnight soak became a dying art outside of Mississippi fish camps. Number 14, sweet potato pie with cane syrup. The cook boiled the sweet potatoes in their skins for 40 minutes on Friday afternoon, slipped the skins off with her thumbs while they were still warm, and mashed the flesh through a colander to keep it smooth. The filling needed a cup of cane syrup from a tall amber bottle, half a cup of evaporated milk, 3 eggs, a stick of melted butter, a tablespoon of cinnamon, a teaspoon of grated nutmeg, and a splash of vanilla extract. The crust was made with cold lard, never shortening. The pie baked at 350 degrees for 50 minutes until the top cracked. A slice on a saucer next to a glass of cold buttermilk was the closing chapter of every Black Juneteenth meal in East Texas. After 1981, when canned pie filling and frozen crusts moved into Black grocery stores, the cane syrup pie became a once-a-decade event. Number 13, Rosewater Pound Cake. The Rosewater Pound Cake was the elegant cake on the Juneteenth table. The recipe came from a free Black baker in New Orleans in the 1880s and traveled into Texas Baptist churches by the turn of the century. The cook beat a pound of butter into a pound of sugar by hand for 20 minutes until the bowl looked like whipped cream. She folded in a pound of flour and 10 eggs, one at a time, then a tablespoon of rose water bought at the drugstore for 15 cents a bottle. The cake baked in a heavy tube pan for an hour and a half. The crumb came out yellow and tight with a perfume that reminded older women of their grandmothers. By 1976, rosewater had vanished from American drugstores and the cake became impossible to make right. Number 12, pit roasted goat. In Brenham, Texas, in 1898, a Juneteenth goat went into the pit before sunup, a young goat dressed out at 25 pounds. The men rubbed the carcass with salt, cayenne, brown sugar, and a quart of cider vinegar, then wrapped it in cheesecloth soaked in lard. The pit was 3 feet deep and filled with mesquite coals burned down for 6 hours. The goat went in on a green oak rack, was covered with wet burlap and a tin sheet, and was buried in dirt to seal the heat. 12 hours later, the men dug it out. The meat fell off the bone. Number 11, watermelon rind preserves. Throwing away a watermelon rind in 1950 was a kind of sin in a Black East Texas household. The cook peeled the green skin off the rind, cut the white flesh into 1-inch cubes, soaked them overnight in lime water to firm them up, then boiled them for 2 hours in a syrup of sugar, lemon juice, sliced ginger, a stick of cinnamon, and 4 cloves. The cubes turned translucent and glassy and took on a faint green gold color. The cook poured them hot into pint jars and sealed the lids with paraffin wax. A jar of rind preserves sat on the Juneteenth table next to the biscuits, sweet and sharp and faintly bitter. The preserves lasted on a shelf for a year. After 1977, when supermarket jam and store-bought watermelon hit Black grocery stores, the rind went back to being garbage. The thrift behind the preserve disappeared with it. Number 10, red velvet cake with beet juice. The Black home cooks who made red velvet for Juneteenth in 1953 did not use red food dye out of a bottle. They roasted 2 whole beets in the oven, peeled them, and pressed the juice through a clean cotton cloth. The cake batter took a cup of buttermilk, a tablespoon of vinegar to react with the natural cocoa, 2 cups of flour, 2 eggs, a cup of sugar, and the strained beet juice for color. The crumb came out the color of dry roses, not fire engine red. The frosting was a cooked roux of milk, flour, butter, and sugar, beaten until it stood in soft peaks. Number 9, glass bottle strawberry soda. A 6.5-ounce bottle of strawberry soda from a corner store in Waco, Texas, in 1958 cost a nickel or so and tasted like nothing else on earth. The soda had been bottled at a small regional plant up in Marshall that worked Monday through Friday and shipped to country stores across East Texas. The bottle was thick green glass with the label printed in red. The drink inside was syrupy, foamy, the color of a faded fire truck. On Juneteenth, every child got 1 bottle and only 1 bottle. The grandmothers kept them on ice in a galvanized wash tub with chunks of block ice broken up with an ice pick. After the small bottling plants shut down in the late 70s, replaced by national brands, the strawberry soda lost its sweetness. Number 8, sour milk corn pudding. The smell of sour milk and corn baking in a slow oven used to come through the back window of every Juneteenth kitchen in rural Texas. The cook saved a quart of buttermilk that had clabbered on the counter for 2 days, stirred it into a quart of yellow corn cut fresh off the cob, added 3 eggs, half a cup of sugar, a stick of melted butter, salt, and pepper. The whole custard went into a greased iron baking dish and into a wood oven for an hour. The top set into a golden crust. The middle stayed wobbly and faintly sweet. After 1974, when refrigeration killed the clabbered milk on the counter, the pudding lost its tang. Number 7, chitlins simmered with onion and vinegar. Number 7 on this list took 3 days of cleaning before it ever touched a pot. The cook bought 10 pounds of pork chitterlings from the butcher on Wednesday, soaked them in cold salt water with sliced lemon for 2 days, scrubbed each foot of intestine with a stiff brush, and rinsed them 5 times. On Friday afternoon, She dropped them into a tall pot with 2 halved onions, 4 bay leaves, a cup of cider vinegar, a tablespoon of red pepper flakes, and a whole peeled garlic head. The pot simmered for 6 hours. The smell drove children into the front yard. The cook never left the kitchen. By supper time, the chitlins were tender, sour, and rich, and folks ate them cut up small over rice or with hot sauce on a slice of white bread. After 1978, when the cleaning was outsourced to a frozen processor and the slow boil moved to a single afternoon, the dish lost most of what made it. Number 6, neck bones over white rice. The pork neck bones came from the butcher in a brown paper sack for 98 cents in 1965. The cook covered them with cold water in a Dutch oven, brought the pot to a boil, then skimmed the gray foam off the top with a metal spoon and threw it away. Into the pot went a chopped onion, 3 garlic cloves, a teaspoon of red pepper, salt, and a tablespoon of vinegar. The bones simmered for 3 hours. The meat hidden between the bones turned soft and pulled away with a fork. The broth thickened into a thin gravy. A plate of white rice underneath caught everything. After 1979, when supermarkets stopped stocking neck bones at the bargain rack, the dish became hard to source for Black families who had relied on it as the cheapest holiday meat in the case. Number 5, lemon icebox cake. The lemon icebox cake was the dessert of last resort and quiet pride at a Juneteenth supper. The cook had no oven heat to spare on a June afternoon, so she made it in the icebox the day before. She crushed a box of vanilla wafers into crumbs and pressed half the crumbs into the bottom of a glass loaf pan. The filling was a can of sweetened condensed milk, the juice of 4 lemons, the zest of 2 and 3 egg yolks whisked together until thick. She poured the filling over the crumbs, layered the remaining crumbs on top, and put the pan in the icebox for 12 hours. The cake set into a tart, creamy slab. Cut into squares and served on a saucer, it was the lightest thing on the table after a heavy plate of brisket and greens. After 1980, when boxed lemon pudding and ready-made graham crust took over, this honest little dessert quietly stopped being made from scratch. Number 4, souse meat. In a Beaumont Parish hall in 1924, a deacon would carry in a yellow ceramic crock of souse and set it next to the cornbread without a word. Souse was the pickled, gelled head meat of a hog, simmered with bay leaf and onion until the bones gave up, cooled with vinegar and cayenne, and pressed into a crock to set. Sliced cold off the loaf, served on saltines, it was the savory bridge between the pickled feet and the brisket. After 1979, the dish disappeared from the holiday table entirely. Number 3, salt pork and white gravy on toast. The smell of salt pork frying in a black iron skillet on the morning of June 19th in 1956 was the smell of the day actually beginning. The cook cut a 1/4 pound of cured salt pork into thin strips, fried them slow in the heavy skillet until the fat ran clear and the strips crisped, then poured off all but 2 spoons of grease. Into the hot fat, she sprinkled flour, stirred, added a quart of fresh milk, and salted heavy. The gravy thickened in 3 minutes. She spooned it over thick slices of toasted white bread on a plate, dropped the crisp pork strips on top, and called the family to the table. Number 2, smothered chicken livers and onions. The chicken livers were the cheapest meat in the grocery case in 1968, 15 cents for a paper carton, and a Black cook stretching her budget for the holiday could feed 6 people with a pound of them. She dredged the livers in flour, seasoned with salt, pepper, and garlic powder, browned them quickly in bacon fat, then pulled them out of the skillet and laid in 2 sliced yellow onions to soften. When the onions turned glassy and golden, she returned the livers to the pan, added a cup of chicken broth and a splash of Worcestershire, and let everything simmer until the gravy turned brown and thick. Served over white rice or biscuits, this was the working family's Juneteenth supper. After 1980, when livers fell out of mainstream cooking entirely, this dish died with one generation. Number 1, peach cobbler with hot biscuit crust. The grandmothers picked the peaches from a tree in the yard on the morning of June 19th, sliced them into a deep baking dish, tossed them with a cup of sugar, a tablespoon of flour, the juice of a lemon, half a stick of butter cut into bits, and a heavy shake of cinnamon. They mixed up a biscuit dough with self-rising flour, cold lard, and buttermilk, patted it into a thick round, and laid the whole disc on top of the bubbling peaches. The cobbler went into a hot oven for 45 minutes. The crust came out the color of toasted bread, cracked open, soaking up the syrup underneath. A spoonful on a saucer with the last cold strawberry soda was how a Black Juneteenth dinner in 1962 ended. After 1982, when supermarket frozen peaches and refrigerator biscuits took the labor out of the dish, the hot crust cobbler quietly faded.
Pig ear sandwiches were another example of how Black families wasted nothing and found flavor where others saw scraps. Pig ears, which butchers often sold cheaply, were boiled until tender, then sliced thin and placed between bread with mustard or hot sauce. The texture was chewy, but the taste was rich and savory, making them surprisingly satisfying. For many, these sandwiches became a dependable lunch or supper when more expensive meats were out of reach. They were especially common in rural towns where hogs were butchered at home and every part of the animal was used. Families knew that wasting nothing was not just thrifty, it was survival. Eating pig ears was also a mark of resilience, turning overlooked cuts into a food that people grew to enjoy. Today, pig ear sandwiches are remembered as a dish born from necessity, but filled with pride, showing just how much strength could be found in the humblest of meals. Hickory nut milk delivered rich nutrition from the forests when dairy was limited or unavailable. Hickory nuts were cracked and pounded into a fragrant paste, then steeped in hot water and strained to produce a creamy liquid full of natural oils and protein. This drink could be enjoyed warm as a morning beverage or used to enrich cornbread and porridges, offering sustenance without reliance on cow's milk. The technique drew directly from indigenous American practices, which African cooks learned and adapted to their own needs. Hickory trees were plentiful across the Southeast, ensuring a steady supply for those willing to gather and crack the tough shells. Even after emancipation, rural families continued making hickory milk for special dishes, and some Appalachian recipes still call for it today. Its smooth flavor and nourishing qualities illustrate how African American cooks combined local knowledge and Old World methods to create foods of lasting value. Hickory nut milk stands as a quiet but powerful symbol of ingenuity, linking the forest's bounty to a tradition of resilience and culinary skill. Sorrel hibiscus tea brought a ruby glow to church socials and summer porch gatherings. Its tart floral flavor, steeped from dried hibiscus petals and sweetened with cane sugar, reflected Caribbean influences that African American families carried north and west during migrations. Grandmothers brewed the tea in large enamel pots, sometimes adding a hint of ginger or a squeeze of lime to brighten the taste. Children watched the deep red liquid swirl into pitchers, knowing it signaled a special occasion. Served chilled over cracked ice in simple glasses, sorrel tea cooled guests during humid evenings while hymns and laughter filled the air. The drink offered more than refreshment. It was a quiet connection to ancestors and homelands across the sea. Over time, soda and store-bought beverages replaced the careful steeping of petals and spices, and the vibrant tradition faded in many communities. Those who still make it treasure the deep crimson reminder of resilience and shared history that once colored every celebration. Stewed field peas with cornbread was a Southern staple that seemed to appear on tables no matter how hard times got. Field peas were inexpensive, easy to grow, and dried well enough to last through seasons, making them a dependable ingredient when other food was scarce. My grandmother simmered them slowly with onion, maybe a scrap of pork if any was left, until the peas broke down into a thick, savory stew. Cornbread was baked alongside, crumbly and warm, and served as the perfect companion, soaking up every bit of broth. Together they made a full meal, packed with enough substance to keep workers fed after long days in the fields or factories. Field peas were humble compared to black-eyed peas or butter beans, but they carried a taste of the land, earthy and comforting. For families with little money to spare, this pairing was dependable, stretching across generations as a dish of both necessity and pride. Stewed field peas with cornbread filled stomachs, warmed hearts, and reminded everyone that simple food could still be good food. Collard green Potlikker soup was proof that nothing in the kitchen went to waste. After collard greens were boiled with ham hocks or smoked meat, the leftover broth was packed with nutrients and flavor. Families would save it, thicken it with beans, rice, or cornbread crumbs, and serve it as a soup. It turned what could have been discarded liquid into a meal that could stretch for days. Potlikker was praised for its richness and vitamins, especially during times when fresh vegetables were limited. Black families in the South cherished it as part of their food culture, a reminder that even scraps held value. The taste of Potlikker soup was smoky, salty, and comforting, carrying both sustenance and heritage in every bowl. It reminded people that resourcefulness was a form of survival and strength. For many households, it was a dish that fed both body and spirit when times were most difficult. Cane top syrup began with the earliest shoots of sugarcane, long before the full harvest. When planters reserved the mature stalks for commercial sugar, enslaved workers cut the tender tops and simmered them slowly, extracting a thin but sweet syrup. This homemade sweetener flavored cornbread, porridge, and hot drinks, adding a rare touch of luxury to daily meals. The technique reflected both African experience with cane and Caribbean methods of small batch syrup making. After emancipation, many rural families continued to boil cane juice into syrup during the early season, a practice still alive in parts of Louisiana and Florida. The flavor is lighter and grassier than late-season molasses, making it unique among Southern sweeteners. Cane top syrup shows how skilled hands transformed what might have been discarded into something valuable, blending cultural knowledge with the natural rhythms of the crop. It stands as a reminder that even in conditions of deprivation, African American cooks created enduring regional flavors that remain treasured in Southern pantries today. Sweet potato pie with brown sugar meringue crowned holiday tables with a beauty that matched its flavor. Smooth, mashed sweet potatoes blended with warm spices created a filling as rich as any custard, poured into a flaky handmade crust. The crowning touch was a cloud of meringue whipped with brown sugar until caramel-scented peaks formed and browned lightly in the oven. Families saved the first slice for honored guests or elders, a sign of respect and affection. The pie carried the sweetness of the Southern soil and the skill of generations who knew how to stretch simple ingredients into celebration. Children licked the mixing bowls clean while parents watched the meringue rise, a shared moment of anticipation before the feast. Over time, commercial pies and instant mixes dulled the tradition, but those who remember the warm aroma of brown sugar meringue know that this dessert is more than food. It is a memory of family love, patient hands, and the quiet pride of homemade beauty. Homemade chow chow relish added brightness and crunch to plates crowded with greens, beans, and smoked meats. Cabbage, onions, peppers, and green tomatoes were chopped fine and simmered with vinegar, mustard seed, and sugar until they formed a tangy condiment that could last through winter. Every household had a slightly different recipe, some sweeter, some hotter, each a reflection of the cook's own hand. The relish brought sharp contrast to rich dishes like pork shoulder or pinto beans, cutting through heaviness with a lively bite. In late summer, neighbors gathered to chop vegetables together, sharing stories as big pots bubbled on outdoor fires. Jars lined pantry shelves in rows of glowing gold and green, a promise of flavor when fresh produce was long gone. Over time, store-bought pickles and bottled sauces replaced the careful preparation of chow chow, but its memory endures wherever families recall the sound of knives on wooden boards and the reward of a bright spoonful alongside a hearty meal. Cornmeal batter cakes were one of the simplest meals that could appear on a Southern table, and they carried generations of tradition within them. Families would take cornmeal, water, and sometimes a pinch of salt, stir it into a thin batter, and fry it on a hot griddle until crisp at the edges. They were plain, but they filled stomachs and could be eaten with molasses, honey, or drippings if there was any to spare. For children heading to school or workers starting long days in the fields, these cakes offered quick energy without costing much. Cornmeal was one of the most dependable ingredients because it was cheap, easy to store, and produced in abundance across the South. A few scoops stretched further than wheat flour, and it did not require yeast or fancy preparation. Cornmeal batter cakes might have been plain, but in households facing hunger, they meant survival and warmth. They were a food that held families steady when little else did. Maypop fruit mash turned the wild passion fruit of the American South into a rare dessert filled with tropical fragrance. Known as maypop for the sound of its hollow fruit when stepped on, this native vine produced aromatic yellow fruits that ripened in late summer. Enslaved foragers gathered the fruit, split the rinds, and scooped the bright pulp into a bowl with a drizzle of molasses or honey when such sweeteners were at hand. The result was a naturally tangy treat that needed no cooking and provided a burst of vitamins. The flavor, a cross between citrus and melon, delighted anyone lucky enough to taste it. Even after emancipation, rural families prized maypops for jellies and pies, and the plant remains a cherished wild edible across the Southeast. Maypop fruit mash preserves a memory of fleeting seasonal abundance and the creativity that transformed wild gifts into moments of celebration, proving that even in the harshest circumstances, people found ways to enjoy the bright, unique flavors offered freely by the natural world. Fried green tomato. Po' boys turned unripe tomatoes into a sandwich that tasted like pure coastal sunshine wrapped in crunchy cornmeal. Thick slices of firm green tomatoes were dredged in seasoned cornmeal and fried until their edges crisped and their centers softened just enough to release a bright tang. Piled high on soft French bread with a smear of remoulade and a handful of shredded lettuce, they became a favorite along Gulf Coast streets where shrimp boats docked and music floated from open windows. Vendors often sold them at fish fries and fairs when seafood prices climbed too high, proving that a garden vegetable could carry the day as well as any oyster or crab. Families remembered the scent of hot oil and the pop of cornmeal batter while waiting in line for a sandwich that blended thrift and celebration. Today, fast food counters try to imitate the flavor, but they cannot capture the quiet magic of fresh garden tomatoes picked before ripening, fried in backyard kitchens, and shared among neighbors who knew the value of every bite. Fish head stew was a dish born out of necessity, yet it carried surprising depth and flavor. Fish heads, often discarded by others, were simmered slowly with onions, potatoes, and rice until they yielded every ounce of richness to the broth. My grandmother insisted the heads made the stew better than fillies, providing body and nourishment that nothing else could. The bones and skin flavored the liquid until it turned hearty and comforting. Potatoes stretched the meal, rice thickened it, and vegetables added substance, turning scraps into a filling supper. The taste was strong, earthy, and unforgettable, reminding everyone that no part of food should go unused. For Black families in the 1960s, fish head stew was a common way to stretch the catch of the day, ensuring nothing went to waste. It became a lesson in thrift and gratitude, proof that survival demanded creativity. Fish head stew was both humble and mighty, sustaining families through lean times with flavor and tradition. Buttermilk cornbread baked in cast iron anchored countless suppers with its golden crust and tangy bite. The heavy skillet, seasoned from years of use, gave the bread a flavor impossible to match in a modern pan. Families stirred cornmeal with fresh buttermilk, a little lard, and a pinch of salt, then listened for the satisfying hiss as the batter hit hot iron. The result was a loaf both crisp at the edges and tender inside, perfect for soaking up potlikker from simmered greens or for eating plain with a drizzle of cane syrup. Grandmothers often taught their grandchildren to test the heat of the skillet by flicking in a few drops of water, a small ritual that connected generations. On Sundays after church, the scent of baking cornbread drifted through neighborhoods, promising a meal that united family and friends. Today, prepackaged mixes and quick breads have replaced the slow, careful method that once defined African American kitchens, and the art of true cast-iron cornbread grows rarer with each passing year. Wild persimmon leather served as a natural energy bar long before packaged snacks existed. Fully ripe wild persimmons, soft and honey-sweet, were mashed into a smooth pulp and spread thinly on clean boards or large leaves. Left in the sun to dry or placed near the gentle heat of a hearth, the mixture became a chewy sheet that kept for weeks. This portable treat provided a quick source of calories for long days in the fields and could be tucked into cloth packets for later use. The technique echoed African and indigenous methods of drying fruit to preserve it for travel and winter storage. After emancipation, many rural families continued to make persimmon leather as an autumn tradition, and some Appalachian homesteads still practice it today. Its deep caramel flavor and long shelf life show how ingenuity and patience created foods that were both practical and delicious. Wild persimmon leather stands as a vivid link between past and present, proving that simple preservation can yield enduring taste and nourishment. Stewed okra and tomatoes were the kind of dish that took simple garden produce and turned it into something nourishing enough to feed a family. Okra, a vegetable with African origins, thrived in southern soil, while tomatoes grew easily in backyard gardens. Together, simmered slowly with onions, spices, and sometimes a scrap of salt pork, they created a stew that was tangy, savory, and thick. Families relied on it because it stretched small harvests into larger meals, often served over rice or with cornbread to make it filling. The dish was especially important when meat was too expensive to buy, as it added depth and nutrition without needing animal protein. Stewed okra and tomatoes became more than food. They were a way to survive with what the land provided. For many, the taste carried reminders of summer gardens and the hard work it took to keep families fed. It was frugal, delicious, and a perfect example of survival cooking. Mustard greens with smoked turkey necks carried the flavor of endurance from one generation to the next. During the Great Depression and later years when ham hocks became expensive or scarce, cooks turned to the neck bones of smoked turkey for the same rich depth. The greens simmered slowly in seasoned broth until tender, soaking up the smoky essence of the meat and the spice of crushed red pepper. Families gathered around the pot to breathe in the savory aroma while cornbread baked in the oven. This dish offered nourishment and warmth, proof that ingenuity could turn modest ingredients into a feast. Children learned to wash and tear the greens while elders seasoned by taste alone, passing down a craft more than a recipe. Today, pre-washed greens and quick cooking methods have dulled the ritual, but the memory of long simmering pots and the steady comfort of smoked turkey necks remains a powerful reminder of resilience and shared meals. Butter beans and rice were another cheap but comforting meal that carried families through lean times. Butter beans, with their creamy texture, were slow cooked until tender, often flavored with a smoked ham hock or bone if one was available. The smoky taste infused the beans and created a rich broth that poured beautifully over rice. My grandmother used long-grain rice that stretched a pot of beans into enough servings for the whole household. The dish was hearty, filling, and nourishing, feeding both body and spirit. Butter beans were inexpensive compared to meat, yet they carried enough protein to keep families going strong. Children learned to appreciate the soft beans and flavorful broth as part of everyday meals, and adults recognized their value in stretching budgets. It was not a dish of extravagance but of practicality, a dinner that turned cheap staples into something people looked forward to. Butter beans and rice told the story of resilience in kitchens where every penny counted and every plate needed to satisfy. Ground pumpkin seed. Porridge transformed leftover seeds into a hearty meal that supplied both protein and healthy oils. After pumpkins were cooked for pies or stews, the seeds were washed, dried, and pounded into a coarse meal. This meal was simmered slowly in water or thin milk, creating a creamy porridge with a subtle nutty flavor. Sweetened lightly with honey or molasses when available, it became a sustaining breakfast or evening dish that used every part of the harvest. The method reflected West African culinary traditions where ground seeds thickened soups and stews, showing how transplanted knowledge enriched American foodways. Generations after emancipation, pumpkin seed porridge remained a seasonal specialty in some rural areas, appreciated for its nourishing qualities and gentle taste. Modern cooks might recognize it in contemporary seed-based milks and cereals, proving that this centuries-old practice still influences how we eat today. Ground pumpkin seed. Porridge highlights the wisdom of never wasting what nature provides and celebrates a heritage of careful resourcefulness that continues to inspire.
Look, these 30 dishes did not vanish because they stopped tasting good. They vanished because the kitchen that made them got smaller, the church suppers got shorter, and the hands that knew the measurements moved to factory shifts in Detroit and Chicago. Recipe knowledge lived in mouths, not on paper. When the grandmothers stopped cooking, the recipes stopped existing. So here's the real question. Which one of these did your family eat? And who in your family still remembers how it was made before the 70s took it away? Tell me in the comments.